Hey, thank you for coming, and welcome to If You Train Them, They Will Learn. My name is Andy Michaels, and I'll be facilitating our session today. I'm a customer success manager here at Salesforce.com, and I work out of our New York office with our mid-sized customers. And prior to this role, I actually spent 4 years in our custom education department, creating training strategies for our larger customers and managing training rollouts from as small as a few end users up to thousands worldwide. So I feel like I have a fairly broad perspective on what it takes to deliver a successful training. Right, this is our safe harbor statement. For more information, please see our company website. All right, now, our session title, If You Train Them. All right, yes, round of applause. Our session title, If You Train Them, They Will Learn, kind of brings forward some images for you baseball fans probably of that great Kevin Costner baseball movie, Field of Dreams. So being a baseball fan myself and quite frankly a Yankees fan, I felt it was only appropriate to ask the question, how did the Yankees win the World Series? All right? No Red Sox fans in here, right? All right. Now, if you did watch that last game, you might say it was Matsui's 6 RBIs or it was Rivera's stellar closing pitching, right? But really, it all started with what?
That's right.
With training. Yes, it all started with training. All right. So during the next hour, between now and your probably happy hours that you guys are counting your minutes to, we will talk about some of the really important things that we want to take away for you. And understanding the value of training your end users, knowledge of the components of a comprehensive training methodology, and insight into applying the training fundamentals to your world. Now, how many of you are from a company with over 500 users? Raise your hands. Okay, good. How about 100 to 500? Hands. Okay, how about under 100? Wow, great. Well, that's exciting. So what I like seeing is that that's a pretty broad representation of our customer base. And what I would like to just emphasize is that what we are going to provide for you today are training strategies that can be applied to companies of all sizes. Really important coming from me in the field, coming into more of our mid-sized customer base to make sure that everyone, all of our customers, really see the value of training and also see that what we're going to give to you today is something that you, as a company of 500 or plus or 100 and less, that you can use. So that's really important for me to just make that clear up front. All right, you are in for a treat today because we have 2 fabulous customer speakers. I'm very excited to have them here. First, we have Britt Copping, who is a training manager at Genentech Access Solutions, all the way up from South San Francisco. And we also have Mark Goodman, who's the director of the Salesforce practice at Citrix. And he's all the way from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So thank you, Mark, for coming all the way across the country. We also have a very special Salesforce.com contributor, Bea Wara, who is a training practice manager in our custom education department, and she has a fan base. Great.
She's got a fan base.
Now, I'm really honored to be up here on the stage with these fine people. I've had the privilege of working very closely with Britt for about a year when I was back as a in custom training. And I worked with Mark for a few months on his project. So I really witnessed firsthand their successes and really know a lot about their training implementations. Bea was very instrumental in working with Mark on the Citrix project. And so we've got a good kind of pairing of the folks up here on the stage. So what I'm really excited to tell you also is that our customers are going to tell you stories. So they're going to tell you the story of their training rollout. And that entails their training approach, some of their challenges, because of course it's not always easy to do what we're doing, and then also talk about their lessons learned along the way. And then our final speaker will be B, and she'll kind of bring it all together and talk about the key components of the training methodology and really how you can apply it to your world. So we will have questions at the end. You see the microphone, so if any of you like being on stage or on the microphone, then please we'll let you come up at the very end. And so go ahead and just reserve your questions till the end. So we're going to have first Britt copying up and up to bat, I guess we should say. And what I just want to really emphasize is that while Britt managed a training rollout of a few hundred users, you'll see that on her training approach slide that this is something that can be scaled, so larger or smaller. So it's really a really good slide to look at to notice kind of what you can do from small up to large customers.
Thank you, Andy. So we were joking outside because I have a 10-month-old baby and a daughter, and I met Andy. We started on the project when I was pregnant, so 9 months of pregnancy, and now my daughter is 10 months old. So we do have a long history, and I'm still talking about Salesforce. So thanks for having me here. Oh, wonderful, Lisa. Going back.
Yeah, here.
Great. Okay, sorry, this has a quick trigger. So I am from Genentech, and before we integrated with Roche, as some of you might know, we were a company of about 10,000 people. What we do at Genentech is we're a biotechnology company, and we create products that service patients with unmet medical needs. So the group that I support within Genentech is called Access Solutions, and that's the Customer Contact Center. So currently we have about 350 employees within the Customer Contact Center, and those are the people that I supported through our addition of Salesforce as our platform that we use within my company. So the implementation highlights of how we use Salesforce, it started about 3 years ago when the entire company really looked at all the databases and systems that we were using, the processes that we were applying, and really said, you know what, we need to kind of overhaul and rethink what we're doing. And let's streamline our processes, let's streamline the systems that we use, and really have an integrated approach to how we do business. So we were a part of that initiative in Access Solutions, and really for us, the launch meant integrating Salesforce with the Customer Contact Center along with our field sales employees. It's a database that we use when we enter any patient information, any information from healthcare providers, and really any moment-by-moment communications that we have with any of our customers. And that's how we communicate with our field partners as well, as through this system. So our objective, we say the case management project because we call Salesforce within Genentech, we call it the case management system. So you might hear me say that just because I'm so used to that name. But we really wanted to gain a 360 view of our customers. A lot of times our employees were writing things down on note paper and not entering everything into the system. So some of the communication would be lost, handing off something that they were doing to another partner within Access Solutions was difficult. So we really wanted to kind of house everything within one source. We wanted to standardize our processes across the portfolio. They weren't standard at that time. And we really wanted to keep all of our valuable information in one place. I alluded to that when I was talking about the notes. Also, the communication with our field sales and our customers was somewhat limited before. So we wanted something where everybody could see the same thing and really work together to really service our customers or our patients, really. And then wanted something where we could integrate reporting into the tool. We also use faxing, so we needed something that could also work with faxes. So that's why we made the choice to use Salesforce. So some of the challenges that we faced, like I said, the whole company was looking at our processes and how we were using systems. So within Access Solutions, we really wanted to redefine our processes. There's 11 product groups that we work with within our team. And so there's lots of different processes. So how can we kind of streamline and get the basics down? Also, the integration of complex systems. I already talked about our faxing system, as well as a reporting tool that we wanted to integrate in with Salesforce. Also, a challenge for us was that we needed to train 300 plus employees on this system. So really thinking about our training approach when we really, at the time, only had 3 trainers in our team to support this launch. That was a challenge. Also, so consistency across the instructors, because we knew we needed to probably have multiple classes going at a time. And then who would those instructors be? How would we ensure consistency and fluency in what they were saying? And then how would we assess the results in the end? And then change management was a big piece of this within our company, as I'm sure within your own, there's lots of changes. Well, for us, we had undergone significant amount of change over the last 3 years. We moved from a very small piece of the organization. You know, as you can imagine, we work with healthcare and reimbursement, so that has become a hot topic. So it's demanded the need to kind of grow. And so with that, we had to grow our systems and our processes, and that was a lot of change that they had seen. So introducing another huge change into their lives, because Salesforce for us, we use that on a minute-by-minute basis, right? So that was a huge change that we needed to address. So our training approach. I started working with Andy in March of 2008. We took a really early view at what we needed to do. We knew this was going to be a big initiative, so we really stepped back and thought about what we were doing as much as we could. Oh, excuse me. Before they told me not to do this.
And you had to do it.
And I had to do it, okay. Of course. So we wanted to get our organization ready. Like I said, the change was a big issue. I think with any big initiative in training, you know, I would encourage anyone to really think about how you are kind of sending out teasers and getting your organization just ready for the idea of this change in this big initiative. So strategy, we were strategizing what this long-term approach would look like. We started that early. And then also, we wanted to put a system in place for developing new processes. And I think that's something that's overlooked a lot of time. You think, oh, well, people get in a room, you'll figure out process, you'll talk in a conversation, you know, but it really starts, the scope of that starts to just go willy-nilly sometimes, because some people are having conversations in their silo over here, some people are having conversations over here, and so we really wanted to create a system for even defining our processes. And this doesn't even have to do with the training yet, although it feeds right into it. So then in April, we really started to develop our content. Now, our system wasn't ready at that time. Our processes were not all defined at that time. But we said, you know what? We need to think about what our training materials will look like. We need to scaffold this deal, right? So we need to think about what the materials will look like so that we can kind of feed things in when it gets to the end and you are kind of going really quick and making fast decisions. So take the time early on to think about your materials and your approach. We also spent a lot of time thinking about how we were going to train our trainers. We knew that they probably wouldn't be like us who are professionally trained as trainers. They'd be people probably on the floor. And so what was that train the trainer kind of approach going to look like? Because we wanted them to be set up for success and not just kind of left as an afterthought in the end and then just say, okay, get in a room with your peers and train them, right? So we wanted to really set them up. Also, we used time with subject matter experts who would then probably become, who we thought would probably become our trainers, to verify materials. So as the system was getting more and more defined, and as our processes were also getting more and more defined, we wanted to make sure that those materials were being verified along the way. So again, we wouldn't get to the end and say, oh, we were thinking about this completely wrong, and we've got to go and start all over. In January of 2009, that's when we really started to move forward and push things out. So we put together a list of prerequisites. So what did we want people to know before they even got in the room for training? So think about, what do your people already know and that you don't need to train on? And then what are some things that you can kind of prep them for early? So approach that we did was we really created some online navigational learnings beforehand that didn't really have to do with the details. It was very high level, but allowed them to kind of see the system, buy into the system, and really ask a lot of questions so that we would make sure that we're addressing the right things when it came to training at the end. We also put our trainers through a 2-week train the trainer session. So for us, we were overhauling a lot of things. You might not be doing that much in your company, so some of this you can take for interesting information. But for those of you who are, this is really a huge initiative for your company, preparing is just so important. So we did 2 weeks of train the trainer, and then we followed up by 4 weeks of end user training. Post-training, now we continue to do enhancements to the system. So really what we did from January until July is that we got everybody trained on the basics of the system. And then at that July point, we really thought about, okay, what are maybe some bugs that are happening that we could be fixing right now? What are some enhancements that we'd like to do that we can start on now, right? And so really making sure that you're thinking ahead to think about what those enhancements will be. How do you want to just make this kind of a living process that you'll keep going through? Because as far as system design and then system training, it doesn't end when you finish your training, right? It continues on, as we all know here very well. And then also what we did was we had our IT folks create a training environment. We thought about our new hires because when our new hires come in, we didn't want them playing around in the live system. For us, it's very sensitive. We have live patient data in there, and so we wanted them to be able to practice and be in a safe environment where it wouldn't really affect that patient data, but it would allow them to play and get used to the system so that when they really were in the live system, they knew what they were doing. So we really worked early to talk about what that training environment would look like and see if we could get that going. So key results for us is that we did train all of our employees. We had 30 plus trainers. So what we did, we had 5 classes going on at a time and 2 trainers in each classroom. We also, because our interactions with our customers are so important and we needed people on the floor at all times, we did a 50-50 approach. We took half of the staff off the floor, left the other half on, and then we switched them out at the end of the day. So it was just utter evolving kind of training class. So 30 trainers sounds like a lot, but when you're having that much going on at a time, it kind of needs to be that way. We redefined our processes. So we now have 5 core business processes that goes across the portfolio and 32 sub-processes. It was a huge feat. I think that change management around that is super important if you're overhauling your processes because we found that was, they're not only getting a new system, they're getting a new process. So it was huge for our folks. We did 40 hours of training, the trainer sessions. We did, I believe it was 60 hours of training. And then, obviously, we assessed them. I think assess your people. So you need to know that they know what they're doing when they get out on the floor. So one way that we assessed them that I thought was a good approach was we did side-by-side observations with their peers. So they had a checklist of processes that they needed to go through within the system, and they literally checked each other off to say, this person can go through this process. That was something that was helpful for us. And it also put the onus back on the end user. Oh, wrong one. So lessons learned. We learned a lot through this. Define your new processes, ideally, before you design your system. So some of the things I'm saying now, you're like, duh, that's pretty basic. We, you know, of course, looking back, you always have the duh or aha moments. But really, if you can define your processes before you design your system, that system design becomes that much easier and that much more accurate, so you're not having to redesign later. Design your system before you design your training. So that was also something that we were not able to do as an organization. There was a lot going on at the same time, so we were doing things in parallel, right? But ideally, your system should be good to go before you start designing your training. We used a lot of screenshots from the system. So at the end, we were going back and redoing screenshots, because we felt like it was so important for them to see on paper a step-by-step process and then a picture to go along with it. Implement change management early in on the process. So this is huge. We took all of our staff off, well, it was on-site, but out of their building, into another building, put up posters on the wall. This was before the system was live and you could click through. And we showed them pictures of what it was going to look like. And we said, what questions do you have? What suggestions do you have? And we really got the participation of the end user just involved from early on. Validate your training materials with your end users prior to going into training. So I talked about this before, but I think it's one of my main key points. So that was something I do think we did well, and it paid off in the end. When we went into training, there wasn't a lot of change to process or document. If it was a glitch in the system, that's something. But as far as the training itself and the processes themselves, there wasn't a lot of change there, and that was helpful. Simulate the real-world experience as much as you can. I talked about our training environment for our new hires. That was great. But, when we were in training, we had them all at computers in a training-like environment, practicing, handing off information to each other within the system. So anytime you can simulate that real-world experience, it really demonstrates to the trainer that your people know what they're doing and helps you kind of pace your training approach. And then when you're live on the floor, hey, they demonstrated this to me in training. If there's something going on and they're not getting it now, maybe something else happened here. And it allows you to really assess where they're at much, much quicker. And then have your IT group handy and on call during training. So this is another thing that we did half the time. So the first half of our training, we had our IT group on email call. And then we were like, no, there's lots of things happening here, and we need you physically present. Anytime you can get someone who's technologically savvy, physically present to sit through the training, the better. I mean, anytime you do online training or systems training and you're using a computer and maybe your end users aren't that savvy with their computer use, this is a good thing to have. And then just wanted to show you really what our materials look like. So the posters, we had posters up in the training rooms that really showed them how to drill down within the system, the basic hierarchy of the system. And they really, I'm telling you, they referred back to it all the time and went back to those posters and were like, oh yeah, like I get that, where it goes from here to here. And they were able to see it, not only in the system, but kind of have a big picture view, right? That was a little bit more tangible and big on the wall. And then we did a 525-page binder. I don't recommend that you do that unless you have a complete overhaul of your processes like we did. So, you know, the 525 pages were not applicable to everyone. We have 5 different roles within our organization, and that binder included all roles. So probably 1/5 of that was applicable to each group, but we thought it was valuable for everyone to have all information. But like I said, we had instructions, call-outs, and then a view of the system. So that is what we did. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Britt. I really like that you point out the importance of having those visual aids. They're very important as you're emphasizing change in process while you're also training on a new tool. So that's a really great thing to take note of. Now, we'll have Mark up next to that, and I want you to take a look at, I'm sure Mark will point it out, the visual aids that they used at Citrix were a really great way to reinforce kind of their life, work life before Salesforce and after Salesforce. So I'll make sure that he points that out as he gets that.
How's everybody doing today?
Woohoo!
You guys are doing good?
Yeah.
All right. You getting ready for happy hour? So we're standing between you and happy hour. That's not a good position to be in. But, you know, when Andy asked me to come speak, I said on really 3 conditions. Number 1 is that I wouldn't give you any sales talk. So no sales in this particular presentation. The second thing is to be as candid as possible. So today I want to tell you really a little bit about Citrix and the project that I particularly worked in with a lot of people and some great teams. But it's really about what we did together in order to get the lead management project in. And what we learned is really to your benefit. So mistakes and all, blemishes and all, we're really going to be candid about what worked well and probably more importantly, what didn't work so well. And then lastly, to have some fun. So audience participation is always welcome. I might ask a couple questions and just to really get you guys involved in the process as well. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. So, lead management project objectives. How many of you out there have a really excellent end-to-end lead management process? Okay, so, well, I see my own team raising their hand, so that's a good sign. Context is important. So let me get back a couple of years and tell you a little bit of story. So 2 years ago, it was very interesting. We were actually managing leads and opportunities in 2 entirely different systems. Opportunities we were managing in Salesforce. Leads we were managing in a complete legacy custom application that was quite antiquated and really on its way out. Can you imagine a salesperson having to go for opportunities in one place and leads to another? It's really, really difficult. Equally important, one of the main things or main challenges that we had back then is that we had no way to really understand when leads came in how important they were. So, sir, what's your name? Sean. So Sean comes in and says, I've got $1 million to spend and I want to spend it tomorrow. And what's your name? Adele. Yeah. Adele says, you know what? I'm probably about a year away from spending. I'm not really sure what I want to do. In our situation, we would treat Sean and Adele exactly the same. We wouldn't know how important Sean was or Adele was until they came into the system and we could ask them questions. A lot of times, though, that was far too late in the process for us to really take advantage of being able to sell something to Sean right away in the cycle that we wanted to. Huge problem for us, and that's when we actually contacted Salesforce and said, hey, we need some help here. So what we did is we said that we wanted to implement lead management in one system with opportunities and see the entire funnel end to end. The other thing that we really had to do, in that show of hands that I saw that had many, many people, over, let's say, 500 people, how many people do business in more than one country or have employees in more than one country? So quite a few of you. And indeed, in our situation, we actually have 4 main geographies, both in Americas, in Asia Pacific, in EMEA, and other places. One of the key challenges that we had is that the business practices across all of those geographies were different. And indeed, even within a geography, let's say China, for instance, within localities, you actually had very different processes based on very individualized cultures. That caused a huge problem for us when we had to speak the same language and talked about a lead or an opportunity, or being able to talk about responders or soliciting touches or interactions. So we actually had to sit down before we even started anything with training or anything around the system and said, we need to increase our common practices. We need to create a framework that everybody could live in, but we didn't necessarily mandate a very rote, rigid process. One of the real key tools about Salesforce is flexibility, but we had to make sure that we had at least a common framework from which everyone can work. And that was a real key challenge for us and one of the real key parts of the objectives that we had for this particular project. And then really we had to reduce the complexity of existing systems. As you can see here, this is our old UI, and there's so many fields and so many bad things about it. Not only it looks bad, but it was really difficult to navigate around. So very difficult, very complex, and as I mentioned earlier, opportunities and leads in completely different applications. And then finally, we really had to look at the ability for us to increase our marketing effectiveness. In order to do that, we actually had to gain visibility into our process of marketing and what programs we were investing in and what was our return on our investment. If you notice, there's really no graphic here, and that's quite by design because we really had no idea. We didn't know what programs were working for us. We didn't know where to spend our money. We were perhaps chasing bad money or good money after bad programs. So part of this process is also being able to really clear up the aperture, being able to get a good view into what money we were spending, and more importantly, where that money was coming back, what returns that we were getting on our programs, and then invest heavily in those. And those that perhaps weren't returning well, maybe discontinue those. So those were our 4 key objectives of the lead management project when we started this. And I might mention we actually started this a couple of years ago. I know a lot of times we say Salesforce in 2 and 3 and 6 months, but there are projects that go a lot longer than that, particularly for us, because we have a lot of integrated systems, a lot of legacy systems, and numerous business processes that we had to consider. So this was actually a 2-year project. Now what I'm going to do, again, to do a final context is set in motion what we did. So as you can see on the bottom, we have our legacy system where leads are being managed from. Our top of the system is Salesforce, where opportunities are being managed. And that's what we did. We moved lead management and opportunity management together. We still integrated, though, back to some of our legacy systems, particularly where master data was contained, to do things like master data checks, because we don't want to be creating new accounts if existing accounts already exist. And then we were able to integrate lead management as a whole into our overall landscape, which Salesforce was a major part of that. So context is extremely important before we get into the key challenges and lessons learned. Does that make sense about where we are and what we tried to do? Okay, great. So key training challenges. 4 global geographic regions, as I mentioned, very dispersed. Different cultures throughout not just those regions, but within certain regions. Multiple local languages. So we definitely had situations where you can't necessarily just give somebody an English-only UI. You had to either translate it to either simple Chinese, traditional Chinese, perhaps German or French. And then, we have about 2,000 users that we had to train, spanning very, very different roles. Marketing and sales and people in our services department, they all had to have a place and a role in Salesforce. And how you train each of those roles might be very, very different from one to the next, not necessarily a one-size-fits-all. Heavy business process change, very similar to Brit's situation. And then a real key part of this was training for our partners. Citrix is 99.9% channel-driven, which means not just internal employees, but external partners that we had to train, because when we have a lead, we actually send that lead out to our partners. We had to get them trained so that they know how to use the tools, how to interact with Salesforce, and how to be able to manage their own leads with such a new system. So a lot of great challenges. It's really a great problem to have, and we were able to really address a lot of that. So let me tell you the training approach, and what I'm going to do is interdisperse lessons that we learned, both good and bad, things that we thought, wow, we could have really done a lot better, and hindsight's always 20/20. So let's go through them, and we're going to really try to keep with the vernacular of baseball, okay? So rather than just the standard lessons learned, we're going to go into some pretty cool lessons. So back in January, we've been live now for about 6 months. We went live in May, so just again, keep the context. So back in January, we had to raise awareness. We had to let people know what was going on in the next 6 months. And one of the key lessons is, as you see, Bill Veck had a really good quote here. This is a game to be savored, not gulped. There's time to discuss everything between innings. What do you think that means? Can somebody take a guess about how we applied this lesson to our training approach? All right, so I'll take a stab at it. So a game to be savored and not gulped. What that meant was that we had, and I think you have to, hit your people that you're going to train early, you hit them a lot, and you keep doing it until you're ready to go live. So the lesson that we learned here, even though January was 6 months prior to launch, I will tell you that I think we started a little bit too late. I think as soon as we have credible information, we should be distributing that and letting people know, here's what's coming, so they can start formulating in their own mind that they know that something's coming up. Now, you may not have all the information. And indeed, back in January, we weren't even talking about an actual go-live date. We were talking about a go-live quarter. Because the variance could be a lot greater when you're 6 months away, and that's okay. And you really have to keep it to a level where people understand, what are the 2 or 3 things that I've got to know that I have to do? Now, there are a lot of channels that we did in order to accomplish this. So we have things like what's called Sales Digest at Citrix that's required reading for all of our sales and marketing users. So what we would do is we put a little blurb inside that Sales Digest and said, hey, it's coming, lead management, be on the lookout. And by the way, the next 2 things you have to do is just tell us what role you are and whether you've heard about the project. Very simple, very straightforward. There was always time in different channels to put more detail in. But this was just awareness back in January. There were other things that you can do because we had a lot of sales users that were already on the system. So we said, great, why don't we use the home page to actually put a message out there and say, hey, lead management's coming. They were already using opportunity management. It was a quick way at a press of a button to get great messages out in no time. So awareness, and it's savor and not gold, because at each time and opportunity that we had to communicate something out, we would do it, even if it was the same thing over and over again. You know the old adage, like, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them? With 2,000 users, everybody's busy with a daytime job. You had to do that. Otherwise, people are going to look up and say, I didn't know the lead management project was coming. You said, but wait, you had all these messages out there. So you really have to do that over and over again in order for it to be effective. Then come February, and we had, very similar to Britt, Train the Trainer. And the lesson that we learned here is baseball is not unlike war. This is Ty Cobb speaking. When you get right down to it, we batters are the heavy artillery. So the lesson that we learned here is that you have to find out who your heavy artillery is going to be. And if it's the project team and the trainers, and as Britt said, she had 3 trainers, and we really, at Citrix, for 2,000 users, we don't have a training team. So we had to figure out, what are we going to do? Do we hire a whole bunch of trainers and do a train the trainer? And then you might be saying, okay, well, what's a PC? So we developed a concept when we did the Salesforce automation project called performance coaches. And what we said is that it's very different if somebody comes to either IT or a training group, or if we hire contracted trainers in, because at some point they're going to leave, and they're going to take all that knowledge with them. So what we decided to do is embed that knowledge with employees, people who are going to be within the business, who are going to be on the team that was getting trained. They were going to be the subject matter experts, the champions, the advocates. So it wasn't just us training people as a transaction. It was taking a group of people who could be real influencers and change agents and having them advocate on the project's behalf. It also filled another really, really good role because, when a lot of people, those 2,000 people, have questions, and you don't want to get bombarded with 2,000 questions or 2,000 issues, some of which might be really valid and some might just be training issues, these folks, like the performance coaches, were great filters, because then they would start getting more and more knowledgeable, and then we only had to deal with a much smaller subset of people rather than all those 2,000 people who would be coming to us if we didn't have heavy artillery like performance coaches. And train the trainers. And if your trainers are internal employees, I think you'd be much better off in the very long run. You might always need to augment staff with contractors, but you need to look at somebody inside, a team of people who can advocate and champion the cause for your project from a training perspective. Heavy artillery, very important lesson learned. So after we did Train the Trainer and the performance coaches, after we trained them and they went out into training with us for the end users. And we had 2 types of training for end users, something called instructor-led training, that's the ILT acronym that you see up there, or VILT, which is virtual instructor-led training. There was no non-live training, except for partners, which I'll talk about in just a few minutes. So all of our training was live, either live in person in an office, or use some of the Citrix products to actually do a live webinar, and actually had live trainers. And guess who was in those offices? Those performance coaches. They would be facilitating the room and answering questions and helping drive the entire training experience. The lesson learned here is that the players make the manager, not the other way around. That's Tommy Lasorda saying that. And how can we take that same analogy and apply it to training from baseball. Does anybody want to take a guess at what that one means? Are you going to make me do this all on my own, aren't you? It's probably one of the most important ones. The players make the manager. In training, the folks that you're training make the training experience, not the trainers. If they show up excited to train, if they show up with open minds and they're ready to go, you're going to have a great training experience. If they come in and they're on their laptops or on their Blackberries or on their Apples or doing whatever, it's not going to go as well. And we've had that experience. We had people who came to training who didn't necessarily pay as much attention, and we had to deal with it after go live, and it's not been easy. And the best way for success here is to get your leadership teams involved. This has to be communicated from the top down. Mark Goodman or anybody else in this room saying, hey, you need to pay attention and come to training is a lot less effective than your vice president of sales or your CEO or your CIO, or depending on the nature of your project, saying, you will go to training, you will be excited about training, here's why it's important. We try to have little games and little giveaways and prizes, but we didn't specifically do enough of this. And I think if we did more of this, it would have been a very different situation post-go live. So again, our lesson learned, hopefully your benefit, if your leadership isn't directly involved in getting people excited about training, I think there's a very good probability that you're going to have an issue. And if you can avoid it at the beginning, I think that would be a fantastic lesson to be learned. Okay? After we did the instructor-led training and the virtual instructor-led training, we had about a month that we continued to drive adoption. And take a look at the lesson here if you read this. It says, looking at the ball going over the fence, it's not going to help. And that's Hank Aaron, like a home run king. What does this mean in the context of training? There are going to be issues. It's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when and how many. And we had literally dozens, if not hundreds of issues that we had during our training process. And here's a real key thing to learn. So again, looking at the ball going over the fence doesn't help. Same thing with training. If people have issues with training, we need to be writing that information down, putting that in a parking lot, and continuously and incrementally improving the training product. If your training looks the same as it did on the 5th training session as it did in the 1st training session, I will tell you, I think there might be a problem. I think that if you put in some addendums, or at least as you're going through the information saying, hey, you know what, we also had some really good feedback from the last training, let me tell you about it. You need to have a process to incorporate that information into your training so that perhaps the training that you give at the very end might be very different, but it's a much better product. And then a lot of times what we try to do is swing back around and said, hey, by the way, from our feedback, we had this information. Now, sometimes we didn't do a great job in doing that, because if we did, I think this would have been a heck of a lot better overall. But we definitely learned our lesson, and hopefully that's a great lesson for you to learn as well. So don't necessarily sit there and watch the ball go out of the park. Run and chase after it. Try to catch it. And in the parlance of training, being able to incrementally improve your training curricula is incredibly important for the overall adoption of whichever product or project you're putting out. And I think the last lesson learned here, and this is in May where we went live, and again, this is after 2 years, so talk about a happy hour. That was a big one for us. Is very simply Ernie Banks saying, let's play 2. Huge lesson for us. We looked at training as a kind of an end state. So we did our training and we went live. And would you believe that we didn't necessarily have any other training since then in the last 6 months? And that's a real key lesson, and I think something is a mistake that we made, because if we play 2, if it's part of your project plans, you put into that schedule that you're not only going to have one training, but you're going to have perhaps a follow-up training, maybe a training 3 months out, maybe 6 months out. You're going to look like a hero, because people are going to have questions, and there's going to be one important thing that they're going to have that they didn't have upon go live. They're going to have the benefit of being on a live system and all the nuances and idiosyncrasies that you're not just going to get from trying as good as you can from a training standpoint and training them before they go live. Once they're in the live system and live production data, things might behave a little bit differently. In fact, most oftentimes, they do. So let's play 2 means is that you actually plan for that, and you plan for multiple training, and then as people have those questions, as they have the benefit of being on the system and asking more interesting and intelligent questions, you already have that training scheduled. And you'll be able to say, hey, that's great, we're going to incorporate that into the next version of training. So you're already taking that into consideration. Because if you don't do that and training stops at that one time that you go live or right before you go live, there's going to be issues post that. And in our experience, we actually had one of the largest geographies who said, you know what, I don't think we got trained well. But when we looked at it, we said, well, let's take a look and see exactly why. And what we came to find out is a lot of these lessons really took place where we didn't have that kind of top-down leadership saying, go in there and do that training. And we didn't really plan on playing two games. We only played one. And I think that would have really helped us if we had planned that out. So hopefully, again, our lesson could be for your benefit as well. Some key results, though, because now we've had 6 months, and to just close out, what I'll say is that we were able to improve the quality and automation of lead flow. So you'll see after Salesforce, what we do now is we score all interactions for quality. So in this case, if Sean says, hey, I've got $1 million to spend, we're going to treat him, we're going to give him a score, let's say, of an A, versus somebody else might be of a B or C or what have you. And so we're going to be able to prioritize our work and our sales team's work much more effectively because now we have this scoring model in place. And indeed, the better visibility to collateral materials in terms of what we used in order to sell a product to a customer is now very visible in Salesforce. Increased common practices across business. The top file that you'll see there, the top picture, is actually the lead funnel that we created amongst all of the groups throughout all those geographies. We came to a common understanding of what that lead funnel should look like. And even though it's a framework, and as I said, within that framework, there's still enough flexibility to move around, people still say that this is the framework, and they agreed that they're going to work within this, which made things a lot easier for us. We did indeed reduce the complexity because now, rather than having Salesforce and, opportunities and leads in different systems, it's all in one, Salesforce, much cleaner UI, and we were able to literally disconnect our old interface into our antiquated system. And then lastly, we're now just starting to really see the benefits, being able to really increase the visibility of marketing effectiveness and trying to figure out, okay, this program is actually returning hard dollars. We need to make more investment here. These over here perhaps aren't, and we're going to discontinue making investments in them. And I think that really has been a paradigm change for us doing business at Citrix with Lead Management Project. And now I'll turn it back over to B. Wara for some additional great information on best practices for training. Thanks a lot, guys.
Good job. Thank you. Ooh, where do I press this one? Okay, got it. All right, Mark and Britta got me all fired up now. Welcome, everybody. And they said the wine's chilling and the beers aren't cold enough yet, so I can keep you in for another 15 minutes. So we're good. All right, so thanks again. That was great case studies. So I'd like to take this opportunity, and I see a lot of people making notes here, so I'm going to try and help you bring everything together now, right? So what do we focus on? We've heard these great words, change management, organizational readiness, processes, challenges, right? So how do I put that on like one slide and say, what are the key things that I need to look at? Key words that you heard again, organizational readiness, communication planning, absolutely critical. We said we get involved early, and that's one thing I would kind of really encourage you to do is get involved early in the project. That way you understand what the challenges are, what the pain points are for your users overall, whether it be a global implementation. If it's global, what are the cultural differences that I need to be aware of, right? So if it's in Tokyo, they have a different way of dealing with the end users. What are the specific points that I need to address? Related to that, what's a communication plan, right? The communication plan is your overall project plan. But then what part of that are we focusing purely on training? What is it that we, leveraging our intranet for? What are the messages that we're posting out there? And that's the best thing you can do for your users now and again, right? So just let them know awareness in terms of what's coming, when is it coming, and how soon are they going to be receiving it, and what's there after, right? Post-deployment support. Related to that as well, you have your training environment. Something that's left, right towards the end, and like just maybe a week before training. Oh, God, what do we do? What do we train in? Is it a production environment? Do we use a sandbox environment? It doesn't stop there. Once we get into those discussions, great, we're using our sandbox environment. What data do we bring into the system? We may not have the luxury of bringing all the data into your tool. So what's that subset that I'm looking at? And it has to be powerful. It has to be close to real-life examples that you can present during training. Does that make sense? Right? Not only that, you also think about your reports, your dashboards, one of the kind of key value propositions that Salesforce keeps kind of feeding you, right? So do I have some effective dashboards that are set up in my training environment? But then you have to have that data to reflect that. Okay? Not only that, also integration. We've looked at our production environments. Maybe we have like 6 to 7 integration points. So for my training sandbox environment, do I need to set that up too? Right, to show that real-life example. Maybe there's an auto-population of an account number from your SAP system. Right, do we have to have that implemented for the sandbox environment? This has to be an ongoing conversation, an ongoing journey throughout the life cycle of your training experience. From that, we look at dashboards. Don't take this lightly. Right, so when we're implementing, we're saying, how willing are they to adopt to this application? What's the buy-in? So obviously our focus are our users. Then from the users, we're going to the business. What's the pipeline generation, right? How many leads are they actually converting? We've already kind of set the stone for you. If you go to our App Exchange site and you just type in dashboards, you'll be amazed what you'll have access to, what types of dashboards you'll have access to. So go out there and start deploying them and start implementing them. And it's really easy to take what we give you on App Exchange and customize them. Anything that Salesforce provides, as you know, on App Exchange, it's free. Right? So download it, play with it, customize your reports, customize those dashboard components, and really have them out there from a user-based perspective. What is it that I'm going to show my users, right, to drive usage? It's not the big brother concept. Drive the usage. But then from there, we go to managers. How do I mentor and coach, which, Mark referred to performance coaches, right? You have your leaders, you have your managers out there. How do I train them to mentor and coach my users to make sure that they're populating the right data in the system, right? Now, we've kind of, like I said, this is an ongoing journey, something that you should be thinking about constantly as you cover all the training milestones. So you can really bucket this into 3 components. If I get there, hello. Okay. One being training strategy. You heard that word as well, right? What is the overall plan? The typical folks that would kind of lead that work stream would be a training lead within a client base, right? I was fortunate enough to be the training lead on the Citrix project from a Salesforce perspective. So this is where I came in, sat down with the team at Citrix, and I said, all right, what is it and how are we going to approach the training strategy and the plan itself? Then we went into the curriculum development phase. Typically, again, you have your curriculum developers, whether they're in-house, right? So maybe in Brit's situation, we had in-house developers. Maybe they leverage other partners and Salesforce to develop the material. And then the training and deployment. So what fits into each bucket? When you're talking about training strategy, we obviously want to make sure we're capturing the overall business objectives. And this is where I said get involved early in the project lifecycle to understand what those key requirements are. Why are we driving this? What are the pain points? What are the challenges? Once we have those defined, we're defining metrics. And what do metrics reflect? Dashboards. Right? Do we have the right metrics in place? From that, we're also looking at your training audience. Right? Who are we training? But when you're saying the who, start thinking about the varied roles. You have your executives, you have your managers, kind of high level, and then you have maybe your sales reps, if it's a sales environment. But within the sales group, you may have a certain number of other business units, like operations. Maybe you have your finance. Right? So do we need to develop material specific for these audiences? Okay? Leading from that is related to these users, where they're located. So maybe we have a global reach, right? So we need to be aware of a global implementation, right? So that will help us, will give us guidance from a delivery perspective. What kind of approach are we going to take? Not only that, what other opportunities can we use to our advantage? So if you have specific national sales meetings that are coming up. So this is where a communication plan is critical, right? So you have your specific events on there. How do we best leverage what we have existing to make sure that we have that reach and we're touching those users? From there, you're also looking at your post-deployment support. Again, don't take that lightly. As Mark and Britt pointed out, right? You have to have a plan in place. Once I step out of this training room, what are the 5 to 6 key activities that I'm going to be measured on maybe over the next week or so? Help define that. So when they get back into their workplace, they're sitting at their desk, I'm going through all my activity and my checklist saying, great, okay, I get this. If I have questions, I have a support plan in place. Who do I ask? Okay? And then also adoption recommendations. From an adoption perspective, think about short-term recommendations, right? So how do I best leverage my adoption dashboards maybe? How do I best leverage my managers, my performance coaches to help me drive the next phase of this rollout or the ongoing usage of the application? Under curriculum development, as we did in the Citrix example, we actually developed all the material for Citrix, where we went in and we put a facilitator guide together for our Train the Trainer program. That's a Word-based document, could be anything from 100 to 200 pages, with detailed call-out notes for instructors. So if you're bringing in, say, other vendors, or if you have your in-house people, they have specific call-out notes saying the session or this particular module should last this, 15 minutes or 20 minutes, for example. What do I need to emphasize during delivery? So that is that facilitator guide. It's really detailed. From that, we extract a participant guide. So we go in there saying, okay, great, so we have the process laid out end to end. This is what I'm going to give my end users. But I need something that they're going to walk away with when they're on the road, they can pull out and reference at any point in time, and those are your quick reference cards. Those are probably the most effective. What customers choose to do as a best practice is they will go out and they'll publish all the guides on the intranet or within the application, but the quick reference cards are printed and they're available during the training and distributed. Then you obviously have your presentation deck, but what's really critical from a curriculum development perspective, don't get bogged down in the feature functions. It's great. Salesforce has a lot to offer. Keep it simple and try and make it progressive, right? So you give them what the key 5 to 6 key tasks are, train them on those, and then have another plan in place for ongoing training. Like, for example, your Outlook, your mobile functionality, right? They may be overwhelmed. So keep it simple and make sure you're hitting on those key activities and tasks, and it's scenario-based, not feature function, but process-based. What's in it for me, right? What are the benefits? What am I getting from this application? And your curriculum should match that or reflect that. From a delivery standpoint, I always encourage a blended approach, right? So from a blended perspective, always we want to have the awareness out there. And that could be a 5 to 10 minute recording that you could publish just as a teaser to kind of show them what's coming. What are the overall objectives of this rollout? What's in it for me? When am I going to be trained? What's that excitement? Any competitions that you kind of, probably distributing iPods or whatever, right? So kind of drive that excitement. Then you have, for example, the Train the Trainer program. If you have, internal trainers, I would highly recommend this. So if you're bringing Salesforce, for example, as part of your services, and say, hey, you know what, go ahead, develop the material. Can you conduct the Train the Trainer session on our behalf? We'll be doing that for your instructors. And one thing that's really become popular lately is leadership training. And as much as we try and push that, there's always budget constraints, there's travel constraints. Even if we can do it virtually, we'll keep pushing for that. That's being management and leadership training, to hold them as the sponsors and the advocates of this tool. Because if they're not responsible, accountable, how are their users going to be responsible and accountable for how they're leveraging the application? All right? Then you have the end user training. Within end user, obviously, if this is the first time introduction to Salesforce, we always encourage on-site training or kind of face-to-face training. If we don't have that luxury, please don't default to just recordings or e-learning. That first-time experience should be personal. It should be hands-on, and even if it's virtual, it's okay. But make sure you have that solid virtual plan in place. If it's virtual training, remember you always have the flexibility, as we do, to hand over kind of the mouse clicks, as we did at Citrix, or presentation rights, and have them demonstrate a scenario to get them involved and interactive. And then always kind of consider your brown bag sessions and your blended approach. One thing one client's doing really well right now, one of my customers, is they're conducting this is all post-deployment, they're actually conducting 1-hour sessions, topic-based sessions every 2 weeks. And they actually rolled out in January this year, and to date, they have 1-hour session every 2 weeks to touch on specific topics, and that's posted on the internet. So it'll be reporting, for example, activities. Without fail, they have, on average, 15 people dialing in at a time. And this is of 600 users that they have, right? So it's okay. People dial in. There's specific questions that actually go through new functionality, and they'll cover that in detail and then have an open forum. Another thing that I will highly encourage you to do is when you're out there and training your users, you have a real solid schedule in place, is try and conduct debrief sessions, even in that first week in the evening, maybe 5 to 5:30, to see what their training experience was like so they can share it with the other instructors. That's worked really well for one of my existing customers. We just finished training 600 users again, right? And 90 on-site sessions. We ran one debrief session a week, but in the first week we did one every single day to see how things were going. So again, I highly encourage that. So again, it's a blended approach, and I'm hoping that this will kind of help you, and I believe we're going to be posting this up on community. The community. Yep, so you'll have access to this, so scribbling away, you'll be okay. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great evening.
All right. Thank you, everyone. So just I think that was a really great way to kind of bring everything together with the customer stories and showing the training methodology side. Again, this is an excellent slide that was will serve as a checklist for you. It'll be posted on our community site. I'm feeling like what it's to be like on the Oscars doing an acceptance speech, because you see I'm getting the red light. So unfortunately we don't have the Q&A time right now, but we'll stay up here for a few minutes. So if you have questions, please feel free to come up here. And business cards. And thank you very much for coming. Have a great rest of the Dreamforce.
Thank you.
Thank you.